Dr. Jane Case, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. We've had your lovely partner on here, Derek, and we are now. He was the one who actually recommended that I have to have a conversation with you. So I'm so glad to have you here. Just for the people that may not know who you are, can you just give us a quick, brief highlight reel who you are and what you do?
I'm Dr. Jen Case with Renaissance Periodization. I have my undergrad in athletic training, master's in sports studies, PhD in human nutrition, specifically looking at nutrition and human performance. And then I have a graduate certificate in dietetics, which makes me a registered dietitian. I'm also a multi-sport world champion, winning world championships in MMA when I was younger, and now jiu-jitsu. I've won IBJJF world title at black belt twice now.
Is Derek completely like overwhelmed with all that? He do
I mean,
every night.
He's done a lot in his own right, but he tries to keep up.
I mean, why the transition from MMA to BJJ?
Well, actually, I was still doing MMA when I was in grad school, but I tore my ACL. And when you're in grad school, you don't have insurance, so I couldn't get my knee fixed. And then by the time and I did that my first year. So I had 3 more years till I graduated and got a big girl job. Yeah. So by the time I was able to finally get back into it, enough time had passed and I was over 30. So switched over to jiu-jitsu.
Much, I guess, safer relative to MMA?
I mean, nobody's trying to punch me in the face, so that's nice.
To just try to rip your shoulder out of the socket instead.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in why you specifically went down the human nutrition for performance path. How did that come around? Was it just always a thing you knew you wanted to do? Did it come from parents? How did that path happen?
It actually came from doing MMA because I was cutting weight to, because the weight classes back then there was only like a 125, 135, and the 155. And I'm a bigger girl, so I was always having to cut weight, and I didn't know how to do it properly. I got all the way through my master's degree, and I was still doing very unsafe weight cuts like diuretics and vomiting and, all of the stuff you're not supposed to do because I had absolutely no idea. I had 7 years of college by then and 1 nutrition class. And so that's what kind of sparked, like, I need to know more because if I don't know what I'm doing, there's tons of athletes that have absolutely no idea what they're doing. And that's what made me go for the human nutrition for my PhD.
What do you remember? What the difference was from you competing using diuretics and all that sort of stuff to actually going, oh, this is how I'm meant to do it. Did you remember what was that difference like in performance?
I think the biggest one for me was my first pro fight I did. I cut down. I think I cut 20 pounds in about 2 months, completely unsafe. And I cut it, I made weight, and then we just went and ate afterwards, like ate crap, And I got into the ring and I felt so heavy and so slow, but luckily I was still able to win. I finished the fight in like 3 minutes because there was no way I had more than 1 round in me because it just took a toll. And so that's when I started kind of researching for myself and trying to figure out better ways. And the cutting process, I still wasn't doing very good, but I started at least learning how to refuel better. And then once I got into the PhD program and finished that up and then did a competition in my 30s versus in my 20s when I was fighting, and to be properly cutting weight and then properly refueling, it was a world of difference.
How long, I guess this is going to be very individual, but leading up into a comp, how long do you advise people should be looking at cutting so that they can make a nice smooth transition into the fight, but then also out of it as well? Is there we should be looking around 8 weeks out, 10 weeks out, 6? What does that look like for you?
It depends on how much the athlete needs to lose and how long they have between when they weigh in and when they compete. Like with the IBJJF, you weigh in and immediately go to your mat. So with them, it's going to be completely different than if you're working with a professional, fighter who gets 24 hours between when they weigh in and when they're expected to compete. So, but in general, I try to get them to start cutting about 6 to 8 weeks out. So you have a natural, kind of healthier weight loss. And then the amount you lose during fight week is going to be anywhere from 2 to 5% of their mass, depending on how much time they have to refuel.
I've always been interested, especially as you said there, in the pro fighting leagues. They have that 24 hours. Like you're like, you know, 155, for example, you might actually fight at 162 or something like that. Like,
185.
well, yeah, well, then why do the what's the point of this weigh-in, you know?
Yeah.
Why do they do that out of interest?
Yeah, I always thought it'd be really neat if when the fighters or any sport where they had the long weigh-ins, if along with their medicals, if they did a DEXA, so you could actually see what the true lean mass, you know, because when they do like the tail of the tape and they compare height, weight, reach, if they had their lean mass on there, I think that would be really interesting to see how that impacts the fight.
Yeah. What do you think? What are your sort of ideas behind that? How would that impact it?
I think the individuals who are not doing the 30-pound cut, especially with the lighter guys, the 250 plusers, when they cut 30, that, you know, for them, you're looking at, again, that 5% mark. But with the smaller guys that are cutting 10, 20, 30 pounds, I think it significantly impacts their power output. And they're, especially as they get into the championship rounds, their energy is just not going to be there like it could if they were closer to their walk-around weight.
Yeah, it's a super interesting way of thinking things. Surely you, I guess as a sport, you want people to be their best. So surely, you know, the behind the scenes people go, okay, here's what everybody needs to conform to. You can't do aggressive cuts. You need to be ready, you know, 6 weeks out, you need to be X amount of percent away to safely do this. Because end of the day, like people want to see a good fight. They want to see a show, especially in the pro leagues, paying a lot of money and they're getting paid a lot of money too. Surely everyone would want to see people performing at their absolute best.
Yeah, and I think you do see that a lot more at the pro because, you know, the UFC, they've got their own dietitians, and we worked with a couple of their fighters. What concerns me more is when I'm at the different gyms, because I travel around to train with different people, and you talk to these young men who want to get into the fight game, and they're just doing crazy things, and the people that are coaching them do not know what they're doing, and those are the ones actually I worry about more because those are the ones that could potentially die, you know, do these unsafe weight cuts, and they either during the weight cut or during competition, it could be fatal if they are doing it completely wrong and putting themselves at high risk.
Yeah, and I guess it's that a combination of the ownership from the coach going, look, I'm not sure how to do that. I need to refer you out to someone like yourself or someone in their local area. Said this person's going to take care of the cut. I'll take care of your training, all that sort of stuff as well. I guess, and also from an athlete perspective to go, hey, I need to do this in the safest way possible.
Yes, yeah. And that, for some reason, guys that want to get punched in the face don't think about how to do things in the safest way possible. I don't know why. I don't know what leads them towards those unsafe behaviors.
Look, for a long time, I've always admitted that females are the superior species, and that just backs up my point. So if we're looking at nutrition to optimize performance, specifically in MMA and BJJ, how should people think about doing that? I guess it's mainly going to be around the competition or even around a training fight. Are we looking at driving carbohydrates into the blood? Are we looking at more of a fat adaptation? Like how do you think about optimizing performance?
Well, actually, the first thing I always try to stress to people is during the off season, don't go nuts. You know, like immediately after the competition, the day or two after, have your celebration, whatever it is, but limit that to a few days and then get back into basic healthy eating. You can still have a free meal every now and then, but what I tend to see a lot, especially, you know, with the athletes that I'm around, is they'll get down to their fight weight, they'll go and they'll do the tournament, and then they'll immediately spike back up 20 pounds. And so leading up to every tournament, they're having to deplete themselves. Whereas if they would come back from the tournament, only gain, you know, 5, maybe 10 pounds, depending on their overall size, like the bigger guys could gain 10, smaller guys only gaining 5. And then when it's time to compete again, they don't have to do that big cut leading up to the event. So then they're able to consume more carbohydrates during their training camp, which will allow them to recover better between sessions, which will then allow them to perform better at each training session. So they're ready, their cardiovascular system, their muscles are all ready to go so they can have that ideal performance on the mats or in the ring or wherever they're competing.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I guess it sort of correlates to any sport where you have to cut weight. If people, you know, think they're never going to have a donut ever again in their life, so they try and consume a 24 fucking pack of Krispy Kremes and like, I need to have it all. But then also, as you said, there is the gaining that sort of 5 to 10 pounds plus, which can come on quite quickly. You're going to have to constantly just do this almost this negative cycle of, oh shit, got to lose 15, 20 pounds again. And you just constantly over and over and over again.
And that gets harder as the athlete gets older, especially once you're working with the masters athletes. Once you're past that age 30 and 40 and so on, trying to cut that weight again and again becomes harder every time.
Yeah, and I think that's what people don't sort of take into account, and realizing that it can come on overnight, but it doesn't go the next night. You know, like it's going to take a hell of a lot longer to do. So if we're looking at leading into just a general, I guess, competition, what are you looking at in terms of like partitioning nutrients? So we're looking at carbohydrates around and even in between fights, potentially, if you've got sort of 3-4 fights in a particular tournament?
Yeah, so whenever I'm designing a meal plan, during your training camp, you're going to want your protein spread throughout the day because your body doesn't actually store free amino acids anywhere. So if you don't take them in every about 4 to 5 hours, your body actually starts to break down skeletal muscle to get those free amino acids that are needed for life-sustaining processes. So that needs to be, you need to have protein throughout the day. Your carbohydrates, though, that's what you want to save for when it's time to work out. You want to have, about a third of your day's allotment a couple hours before training, and then you're going to want to have a nice amount of them while you're training. And people often, they don't want to do the carbohydrates while they're working out because there's that mentality that, I have to suffer for this training session to really mean anything. And it's like, well, no, if you consume those carbohydrates, you're able to spare your muscle glycogen because you're bringing in a dietary form of carbohydrates. So you're actually able to exercise harder and get more out of that training session. And then once you get done with your training session, again, more carbs, more protein to facilitate the anabolic effects of training and set the stage for muscle repair and growth as you are recovering from training, hopefully going to bed and getting some good sleep and that sort of thing. And then fats, you just want to push those away from the workout window as much as possible because they're going to slow everything down. If you're even allowed fats. If you're cutting, you're probably not going to have many fats in your diet anyway.
Do you, even with that, the dieting process and fats, do you advise a minimal amount of fats just for general hormonal production, or do you think the body's fine without it for a small period of time?
For a small period of time, you're probably going to be fine because the minimal amount is 40 grams of fat per day. And if you're consuming animal-based proteins, you're probably going to get that from your protein sources. But if you're only consuming plant-based protein, then you may need to add in some nuts or something so you do get those 40 grams. It just kind of depends on the individual.
Okay, yeah, I think that's it's a great point you brought up about even intra-workout, like something like a cyclodextrin or dextrose or something of that sort of nature. It's only recently that I've been doing that myself, just having more calories to play with, and the difference is it's astronomically different. Because I was like, no, I was always in this weird mindset of I don't want to drink my calories. I was like, no, I want to eat them, because I'll be hungrier, and I'll binge like an idiot later. So don't drink them. But then I found that actually drinking them during a workout felt much, much better. I'm like, hold on a second. If I can have this during my workout in a strength-based session, I can lift more load. So I'm able to get stronger and build more muscle tissue as well. I was like, why the fuck wouldn't I do this before? If I can obviously get a caloric allotment as well. But profoundly different.
Yep, that's pretty common response.
Yeah, yeah, crazy, huh? But so if someone, for example, has in a tournament 3-4 fights, would you advise just sipping on something like a carb powder, like in between, or a protein carb powder?
Yeah, especially like if you're doing a tournament that lasts all day, you need to try and eat when you can. But depending on what the tournament is and how well it's organized, you may not know when you're going to be up. So you don't want to have just eaten a sandwich and hey, you got to go grapple right now. So sipping on, your Gatorade or whatever, and adding a little bit of protein powder to it, since you're going to be drinking throughout the day, is what I recommend to most of my teammates and athletes that I work with, because you got to keep those glycogen stores up so that when it's time for you to go, you're ready and you're not going out there drained.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing, because when it's tournament day, you got that, butterflies in your stomach and you don't want to put anything in your system, but you need it. Your body needs that fuel.
I guess from a digestive perspective as well, it would digest quite quickly as well. So you don't have to worry about a lot of blood flow driving to your digestive tract.
Right. Yeah.
I think this sort of leads nicely into nutrition and the weight cutting that we're speaking about before, about people doing it in an unhealthy manner, what does that look like, trying to stay as healthy as possible with, I guess, with nutrition? Obviously it's going to depend on individual to individual, but what are your general guidelines on, okay, here's how we're going to cut weight efficiently? Is it, as we sort of briefly said, is like, do we just cut fat out completely to optimize performance through carbohydrates and enough protein per day, whether it's, you know, the 2 grams per kilo or 1 gram per pound? What does that look like for you?
So first thing, you got to make sure that your weight loss goal is realistic. Even if it's leading up to an event or anything like that, you don't want to be trying to lose more than 1% of your total mass each week. When I'm working with just someone who's just wanting healthy weight loss in general, I limit it to 0.5%. But when you're leading into a tournament, you're going to see a little, or a fight or whatever it is, meet, you can amp that up a little bit because it's a short time. You know, you're looking at 6-8 weeks. So you can bump that up to about 1% of their total mass being lost each week. If your athlete is wanting to lose more than that, recommend that they push back whenever they're wanting to compete, because what they're wanting is not something they can do safely. From there, once they have established a safe goal that they want to hit, then you're going to be looking at, with the protein, it is going to be about 1 gram per pound of body weight, or 2 grams per kilo. Here in the States, we make up our own system of measurement.
You're the only place in the world that's so confusing working with my US athletes. I'm just like, I have no idea what these pound things mean.
So the 2.2 per kilo, that's a perfect recommendation. If I have an athlete that's really needing to cut, I will reduce that a little bit and look at just their lean mass instead of their total mass. And so that does give you a little bit of wiggle room to bring it down. I wouldn't drop below about 0.8 grams per pound, or I think that'd be just under 2 grams per kilo on your side, the protein, because they are going to need that protein for turnover, repair, growth, everything that's going on, everything they're putting their body through. On the carbohydrate side, with that, it's going to depend on what your athlete is doing. Your strength power athletes, they can actually get away with about 2 grams per, 2 grams per pound, be about 4.5 grams per kilo over where you're at. Your endurance athletes, you're going to double that. Okay, and when we talk about endurance, we're looking at those athletes that are going to literally be active for an hour or 2 hours. Your ultra endurance athletes, that's a whole nother animal, a whole nother talk. But for most athletes that you're going to be working with, your strength power, you're going to be looking at about 2 grams per pound is how much you kind of play with them. You start dropping below that, and they're going to have a hard time finishing their workouts. I never recommend keto or anything like that with your active individuals. You're just looking to damage their muscles, and they're not going to perform well. It's just not a good option. So, and then fats are just kind of help fill up the calories.
So I get it's almost like the opposite to bulking, I guess. It's just like enough protein, enough fat, carbs fill up the calories. Cutting it's like, okay, let's go protein, carbs, fat will just sort of make up the calories almost. Would that sound about right? Yep.
Yeah, fats, that's what's kind of nice about fats, is they're just they're a nutrient that you need, but they are by far the most flexible, because you can spike them up, you can cut them down. You know, the minimal amount is only 40 grams. You know, that's not much at all. So they're really a nice flexible nutrient to help kind of, you know, either help with the calorie cut or fill up your calories if you're trying to mass.
So if you have somebody that comes into you, and I'm sure many people, listeners, that are on a ketogenic diet, and they're like, I want to optimize performance, I'm in the fight game. What does that initial conversation look like? Because they've potentially, you know, been doing this for years. They're very hesitant about that. Is it a conversation of like, look, let's start with a little bit of carbs? Or do you potentially not even tell them like, hey, here's a cool drink, have during your workouts? Like, oh, my performance is amazing. Guess what that is? It's glucose.
Yeah, we normally don't give our athletes things and not tell them what it is. That's not generally recommended. But it is, I think the hardest thing, to get them to try and eat dietary carbs is a little bit easier, because they'll eat sweet potatoes and things like that. For some reason, sweet potatoes is, I don't know, they just love sweet potatoes. So that's an easy carb to get in. The battle I have most often is that intra-workout shake. Trying to get them the pure sugar, to get them to take that, that's the hardest. So I have a mountain of studies that I do send over so that they can see, and we start small, a very small amount of carbs, just kind of dipping their toe in. And then when they start to feel how much better they're able to perform, then I start really increasing the size of that shake.
What does that look like? I'm interested from, I guess, a physiological perspective on their ability to utilize carbohydrates as an energy source. If they're so used to just fat, you know, maybe they become fat adapted, for lack of a better word. But how does that look like from introducing carbs? I mean, does the body really ever forget how to utilize carbohydrates efficiently if they've been doing it for years and been on, let's say, less than 50 grams of carbs a day for 2 years or so?
Well, you know, I can't think of any studies that come to mind right now where they've looked at someone who's truly become fat adapted, because in order to do that, you're usually working with endurance athletes, and it is a multi-year process. So when you're working with an athlete who's been on a ketogenic type diet, it's maybe for a couple months or maybe a year. And at that time, yeah, their body still knows how to use the carbohydrates. So as soon as you start introducing them in, all those receptors that have been starved, they're going to be reactive, and they're going to take in that glucose and really be able to use it.
I guess, yeah, as you sort of said before, it's progressively reintroducing. You'd never go, hey, you've been eating less than 50 grams. Here's 450 grams of carbs.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I don't think they would do. Number one, I don't think they would agree to do that, and it also probably give them a headache more than anything else. All that glycogen going straight to their brain.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that cognitively, the brain works better off carbs or fats, or a combination?
That's been shown over and over again. Over 90% of the energy that your brain utilizes comes from glucose. That's one of the reasons why when you're on that ketogenic diet, you get irritable, you have trouble concentrating, the headaches, all of that is because you starved your brain of energy.
Yeah, the brain fog and that. I ask because I've recently got a client that's just signed up with myself, and this is the conversation that we're sort of having, and it's really interesting because it's reintroducing, sort of igniting what I've said, and go, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm right here, just from my own like knowledge. And now you've said that I'm like, oh, thank God for that. Because some people are very like adamant of like, no, I feel better without them. I generally think my brain is better as well. And like, well, you know, have you tried it this way? Well, no. And how do you know? You know? Yeah. So if we're looking at the final week, like week leading up, let's say Saturday's competition, what does that Monday to Friday look like in terms of nutrition? Are you slowly still trying to pull calories to try and make weight? Because obviously weight's going to be on fight day. What does that week look like without mitigating performance from a nutrition perspective?
So there's two main circumstances to think about. You got your grappler, who's only going to have maybe a couple hours to minutes before they compete. And then you got your professional athlete who's going to have 24 hours. So those are two different situations. First, the grappler. So when you look at them, what you're actually going to manipulate with them is pure water. And that's one of the things that a lot of people have trouble with because, you know, they're usually wrestlers. A lot of times wrestlers are what you're working with, post wrestlers. And in wrestling, right, they wouldn't eat the week of the wrestling meet, you know, or they, you know, maybe have an orange or something crazy. They did all kinds of crazy stuff, even though, you know, weight cutting doesn't actually happen in wrestling. Yes, it does. But with them, what you want to do is you want to keep their carb intake up because you want to keep their carb stores up because they don't have time to replenish those glycogen stores between when they weigh in and when they compete. But what you do have time to do is start cutting their water and then rehydrate them a little bit before they go and compete. And so with them, what I would do is at the beginning of the week, you really start to water load them. Not an excessive amount, maybe 2.5 gallons of water throughout the day. So remember, you don't want to like chug that water right after practice because you are at risk of hyponatremia at that point. So gradually consuming a large amount of water for the beginning of the week. And then 48 hours before weigh-ins, that's when you cut the water. And you don't do it before then because what you're doing is during that time, the fluid intake is down, but urine production remains elevated. So yeah, they're going to gain weight at the beginning of the week because of that excess fluid intake, but they also are ramping up their urine production. And then you stop that high amount of fluid intake, urine production stays elevated so that by the time they go to weigh in, they're, 2-3% less than they normally are because they peed out all that extra fluid. And they've got their glycogen stores because you never cut that.
What does, do you do anything like with sodium manipulation or anything of that sort of nature, or you just let that be the way?
No, once they go for the no more water, then it's going to be no extra salt. So I don't cut any salt out of their diet, but I tell them don't eat pickles or lunch meat or anything that's going to be really high in sodium. during that 48 hours.
Okay, cool. I think that's a great tip for everyone. I know it's big in the bodybuilding world as well, is people messing around with like sodium manipulation, things of that nature, which is extremely hard to do efficiently. Turns out, go figure, that the thing that's trying to keep, one of the things that's trying to keep us alive.
So then your athlete who has the 24 hours, with them, I still do the water cut, but now you can start playing with glycogen. And with them, you're going to still ramp up their glycogen until, again, about that 48, 72-hour mark, depending on the size of the athlete and how much they need to cut. And then you're going to start significantly dropping their carbs. And what that's going to do is cause their body to drop its glycogen stores. And when your body stores glycogen, it also stores water. So again, you're just dropping more water out of that athlete. And because they have 24 hours between when they weigh in and when they compete, they have an ample amount of time to replenish those glycogen stores. Because once they weigh in, they need to start, drinking some Gatorade, getting in some simple carbs to start bringing their glycogen stores back up. And they're going to want to continue to snack on small meals about every 2 to 3 hours, and then obviously go to sleep, but keep snacking until their event to help bring those glycogen stores back up.
So I guess that was going to be my next question. Is there an efficient way of doing it? Is it just small little meals, just progressively, because you've just gone through this decent enough cut?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially with the 24-hour athletes, you don't want them. They need to eat, but if they just go crazy and have like a huge meal, it's going to cause a lot of bloat, a lot of gastric upset, and that's actually going to end up slowing the rate at which their body's able to process stuff.
Leading into the weigh-in for the 24-hour athlete, is there a particular meal that you advise to go, hey, we need to keep things as tight as we possibly can? Is it just like pure protein?
Yeah, if it gets to the point that they're close to their weight, and you really got to keep it as minimal as possible, they're going to get 3 small things of casein pudding the day of weigh-ins.
Is that a Dr. Mike, or is that an RP thing? Like, who created this? Because I've started to use this and it is amazing. It's especially with dieting, it's just like the greatest little snack. So did it come from the RP team, or did it come from Mike?
I don't know where it came from. It's it's been around. I've talked, different people I've talked, and everybody's got their own secret recipe. One of my friends, with his nutrition field, they freeze theirs, and so it's a frozen yogurt is how they have their, but it's basically still a casein protein. So
what I've found as well is, with it being slower releasing, is that it like pre-bed's obviously great, but after a workout, if I don't really feel like eating, I've got clients in a little bit, and it's going to take time to cook and to eat, and I don't want to feel too full. It's just a perfect little meal that sustains me for the next 2-3 hours.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's a really good option when you don't have time to eat.
No, 100%. Can you consume too much with it being so delicious? I guess, is there any negative effects to eating a ton of it?
If you consume too much, all it's going to do is the amino acids are going to be converted into glycogen and stored as glucose. Or if your glycogen stores are full, it'll get stored as fat. So it's not like there's a toxicity to it or anything like that. If you eat an entire tub of it, you could have a toxicity. But no, if you consume 50, 60 grams, it's fine. It's not recommended. RP does not recommend that. It's just saying if you go crazy, it'll be fine.
Okay, good. There was only a few days ago where I ate a lot of it just because I was so busy, and it's either this or nothing, and I wanted to have this. Is there what are some of the biggest sort of mistakes that you find from a nutrition perspective that a lot of people are making leading up into that fight week? Things that we could sort of advise the listeners to say, hey, look, if you're doing this, maybe think twice.
The biggest thing that I've had with especially teammates is they don't want to eat after training, because a lot of times, our practices are at night, and by the time you get done, it's like 10 o'clock, and they still think that they shouldn't eat right before bed. And that's kind of a double whammy, because one, they're still in that catabolic state from training so hard, doing jiu-jitsu, where it's anaerobic and catabolic, and they're going into sleep, which is when the bulk of your muscle growth and repair occurs, and they have not eaten. And that's probably one of the worst things. And trying to get them to understand that you need the carbs post-exercise, to replenish your glycogen stores and start the recovery process. And you need that protein because it's post-exercise, and you need that protein going into bedtime because that's when most of your protein turnover and protein synthesis is going to be occurring. So trying to get them to eat a good-sized meal after training is probably the hardest thing that I've seen and had to kind of not argue, but try and get them to understand why it's so important.
What I mean, for those people, is there a particular go-to meal that you're like, look, I know you don't like eating, here's a really easy meal to eat?
Yeah, for that, it's usually going to be whey protein and Pop-Tarts, and then casein right when they go to bed. Because it's, it's very, very low volume, but you got a ton of carbs and a ton of protein in that.
Yeah, I like that. And that doesn't mean everybody that applies directly to you, that you're like, hey, well, Jen said that I can have Pop-Tarts and whey protein. Obviously, caloric needs and intake are all going to be super important as well.
Yes, you got to go and train hard before you get your Pop-Tarts.
Yes, 100%. Earn those Pop-Tarts. That's going to be on a t-shirt. That's what I want to say. Any other sort of myths, any other things that you see people making the mistake, more so night before weigh-in? Is it the themselves?
The cutting water too soon. That's a big one. Because I just talked with an athlete who was getting ready to compete a couple weeks ago. Because they're so worried about making weight, they start that water cut like on Monday when they're weighing in on Friday. It's like, no, it's that 48-hour window. If you start cutting that water too soon, your urine production is going to go down, and you're going to feel like crap, and you're not going to be able to have that benefit of the water cut because you're just completely dehydrated. And so you're going to go multiple days in a dehydrated state leading up to the weigh-in and then the competition.
Yeah, it's always an interesting one. I think it does come back to what we briefly touched on, was that lack of knowledge and that not wanting to seek out that knowledge for themselves, whether it's just through laziness or I'm not exactly sure the answer to that or the reason rather behind it. But as you said there, that water and sodium manipulation could almost be life and death. Like you could potentially die by not doing that correctly if you go too aggressive.
Yeah, and if they stay dehydrated for too long, because you dehydrate yourself, make weight, and then you immediately start rehydrating. And you rehydrate, you just keep sipping on 6 to 8 ounces of fluid every about 15 to 30 minutes. You just keep gradually rehydrating. But if you dehydrate yourself 3 days beforehand, and then you remain dehydrated for 3 days, that's horrible on your system.
And also, I mean, for people listening, if you care so much about your performance, then that's going to be crucial to performance, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
So nutrition, we've talked a little bit about that, and the weight. I'm interested in what the programming itself looks like 7 days out from competition, or 6 days out from competition. Are you looking at potential? I'd assume athletes are doing a combination of resistance strength-based training and MMA or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What does that look like? Is there one that sort of takes favor, and then do you back off altogether? Volume, I'm assuming, comes down. What does that look like a week out from comp?
The week out, you should be pretty darn low on activity. You should be in a deload on your resistance training side. And when you're in your training camp, your lifting is going to take a back seat to your striking or your jiu-jitsu, whatever you're getting ready for. So you should already only be lifting 3 to 4 exercises during each of your weight training sessions, because you don't want to fatigue yourself too much during that and not be able to focus on your primary sport. But yeah, the week out, that's deload week. So you're looking at half volume or less, very light lifting. With training, let's say you're going to compete Saturday, your hardest training day is going to be Tuesday. And even then you're looking at maybe 4 rounds. If it's jiu-jitsu, 4 6-minute rounds, 8 minute, however long your matches are, 4 rounds. And then Wednesday, you're going to come in and do a little bit of movement. And then Thursday, Friday, you're off. Don't let anybody touch you. And that's the hardest thing, is because you're so used to grappling, you grapple every night. And then you're like, you want me to sit still for 2 days leading up to, you don't have to sit still, but you don't get that interaction. But the thing is that you need, number one, the time to recover. And you also do not want to get hurt right before your event. And so you can't be on the mats with your teammates because, it's not a good time. You don't want to be getting hurt.
Yeah, and it's so funny you say that. Mine particularly never done any serious like BJJ or anything, but from a rugby league background, I've had this happen twice his teammates breaking their jaw in warm-up, like just before the game, hitting tackle shields, going a little bit too hard and breaking their own jaw. One of them run into the guy who was holding the shield's elbow, and one just hit the pad face on and broke his jaw, like literally before the game. So it sounds stupid, like you don't want to get hurt, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it is you're really amped up because your competition is so close, and so you're like, I got to make everything count, and you just hurt yourself.
Yeah, there ain't no competition if you break your own arm.
Yeah.
So that deload sort of happening leading up into the day. On those 2 days or so off, what do you advise people do? Is it just going for a walk? Is it just going for? I don't know if sauna would be the right thing, because that was going to affect weight.
It'd be like a massage. I wouldn't recommend sauna. No systemic heat, but yeah, get a massage. Just relax. You still do want to do something. You don't want to just sit in a chair, right? But you do want to get up and just move around a little bit, but don't go crazy.
Yeah. When should people look at, especially from a resistance training, when should that volume start to come down? Is that sort of like 3-4 weeks out, start to sporadically taper off, or what does that look like?
So if you're wanting to gain muscle, you need to do that during the off season. So your high volume training is not going to be happening anywhere near the competition. The 6 to 8 week training camp leading up to your competition, that's going to be more of a strength power phase. So you're going to be looking at your lower reps at higher weights. So, 6 to 8 reps, or even 4 to 6, depending on what you want to do, maybe up to 5 sets. And again, just the 3 to 4 exercises. And you're going to do that, 3-4 times a week, and that's it. So really, when you're in your training camp, your weight training portion shouldn't be more than an hour long. This should not be a crazy long session. And I recommend, if possible, trying to do your weight training as your second workout of the day. That way you're freshest, both physically and cognitively, for the jiu-jitsu or the striking part. The one's going to take a lot more focus, right? It's not that hard to pick up a barbell and put it down. That doesn't require much thought, right? But trying to pass a guard, move around, get the submission, move around, right? All of that's a lot of thinking, a lot of cognitive. You don't want to be trying to do that when you're already fatigued.
No, good, really good tip. And I think first, anyone, regardless if it's peak week or not, is that the sport should be the priority, right? Like, so it's like, do that first while you're freshest, so you can be better at that, and then obviously the training or the conditioning can be secondary.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about your own mindset going into a fight. What was that ritual like? Did you have something? Was there a specific music that you would play? Was there just this inner monologue going on? What was that like leading up into a fight, especially a world championship fight?
Like leading up, for me, most of the time, I wear noise canceling headphones because it's the crowd that I can't, like, my nerves, like, you will be able to even see my heartbeat, like my chest is fluttering. Yeah. Like that's so for me, the biggest thing is trying to just remain calm. So I don't, listen to the loud music or anything like that. I'm listening to songs that I like, which is usually like old school rock or pop, or, someone's got a good beat, but it's not crazy loud because I'm trying to keep myself calm. So I'm trying to do a lot of deep breathing. I do visualize, because when I go in to a tournament or anything, I have a set, pattern that I'm looking for. I have takedowns that I have in mind. And then once I hit this takedown, what am I going to do next? So I'm visualizing those, and I'm just trying to breathe and stay calm and just not let myself get too amped up. I usually will try to sit outside of the arena somewhere so that there's not all that chaos, which this past Worlds, there were no spectators allowed, which I absolutely love, because that meant there was not that big crowd. Especially because it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we obviously have a lot of Portuguese-speaking coaches and athletes, and that just makes my anxiety even worse. Just them yelling in a language that I don't understand, because it's just confusing. You already got the chaos and the nerves, and then there's this confusing, you're like, what's going on? And so for me, that's the biggest thing, is like, just stay calm, think about your game plan, and I don't even look at the other chicks. I'm like, I don't care. Whoever gets on the other side of the match, fine. But I'm not going to look at her. I'm not going to watch her other matches. I'm just focused on what I'm going to do.
That's brilliant. It's so interesting you sort of said the in a different language, because it's sort of like that when you go traveling to a country that you might never have been with, and you feel like these people are having an argument, but they're just having a normal conversation. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, then and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Brazilian nationality or anything like that, but they're just loud, and the Portuguese language, it's very aggressive, and it just sounds so like rah, and you're like, oh my god, what's going on? And they love to pound and stomp, and they're always taking their flip flops and pounding and stuff. There's just so much noise.
Do you reckon they do that on purpose? Maybe like an intimidation thing potentially?
It could be, kind of like with New Zealand and their hakama and their stomping, and they use that as pure intimidation. It very well could be.
I've got a friend I used to work with, and he spent, I think, 6 or 7 years that in Rio, right in sort of well, I mean, he called it the slums, but I don't think it was, but it was very much in this rough sort of neighborhood. And that's where he did. He lived over there just training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and just coaching it. And it was funny speaking with him about that, about the difference from the Australians to the Brazilians about their different ethoses and methodologies and stuff. And he said it was just way more intense in there. He goes, every single time you watch in the gym, you feel like someone's going to try and kill you. He goes, yeah, because that's just, they're so obviously passionate about it that he says that's what it was like. He said, but it was also, he goes, the greatest reward, because going in there, you're just on. He goes, every time you go into the gym to train, he goes, it's a performance. It's not a training session. This is the championship. Like, we have to fight like this every single time.
Yeah.
So it was brilliant to see that. So leading up into the fight, where we're staying calm, the fight sort of happened. What does that look like? You finished the day, you've taken on the championship. What does the next couple of hours look like? What is the go-to meal of like, I need to go and have this? This is what I've been thinking about the last 8 weeks.
Ice cream. I always get ice cream. Post tournament, it's ice cream. And then, the food-wise, anything, because I'm just, I know I'm hungry, but my stomach is still all in knots, so I can't really eat a ton. Yeah. But that victory ice cream is a must after every tournament. So this past tournament, poor Derek, we were driving all over Orlando trying to find some place that was open so I could have my ice cream. Because, everything with COVID, everything's like closing at 10 o'clock. And so by the time the tournament's done, like, where's my ice cream?
Did he find them?
Oh, of course. We ended up with 7-Eleven, but I got my ice cream.
What does your current training look like? What are you doing at the moment? Obviously, is it more difficult now with COVID and stuff happening? I don't know if some people are still a little bit funny about going back in the gym, where there might be great competitors. What does that look like at the moment?
So right now, so with Derek and I, we bounce between Tennessee and Kansas, and right now we're in Kansas. And so at my gym here, some of my favorite people to roll against, they aren't coming in because of COVID, mainly because of their jobs. They work with a high-risk population. So they can't, they're in law enforcement and medical, so they can't come in. But, what's cool about my gym is we actually have 13 black belts. So, some of my favorites are missing, but we still got some really hardcore competitors. And some of our underbelts are just freaking beasts. They just love to compete, and they're intense. So, we still get a lot of good training. Right now I'm getting ready for the Dallas Open, and there were no masters. So I'm doing the adult division, which is 10-minute matches, which is a long time. So right now I'm really focusing on the cardio and just being able to last for 10 minutes. Because at masters it's 5 and 6 minutes, but I want to compete, so I got to get ready for these 10-minute matches. And so I've been working a lot with some of the lighter weight classes because they're swirly, and for them to go 10 minutes, it's a lot easier than it is for us bigger people. So that way I'm keeping up with their energy level and their movement for those prolonged period of time. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now.
How do you feel? Do you feel you're naturally adapting to that, or is it still quite a struggle?
I have to work at it because I'm a big individual, so I'd rather finish the match in a couple minutes than go the whole 10. This is mellow. So, but and again, I'm visualizing a quick takedown, quick sub. But if that doesn't happen, I need to be ready to fight because the guard game of some of the black belts I'll be going against is amazing. Their guard retention is it's like you think you're past, and all of a sudden there's a foot in your armpit pulling you back into their guard. It's crazy.
Who or what I guess, is the most difficult sort of fighter for you to fight against? Is it someone that's got a strong guard? Is it more of an attacking sort of or offensive rather opponent? What's the most difficult one for you?
It's going to be those lighter individuals that can like basically fold up and retract all of their limbs. It's grappling a hermit crab because it's like, oh, there's an arm, oh, it's gone. Oh, no, it's gone. Because they're so small and flexible that it's just hard to pry them open to have an arm or a leg or a neck, something to attack, because they just able to get in and get really small, and it makes it really hard to catch something.
That would be interesting. And what do you find you're strongest against?
The big girls. I love the big girls. My fellow super heavyweights, because we move the same speed and we're big. We can't get into little tiny balls.
Yeah.
So it's easier to start prying them open and kind of getting them to expose something so you're able to catch a submission.
Okay. It's a sport that I'm fascinated with because it's something that I'm like, I really want to do that. And then coming from a rugby background, that we did a lot of wrestling and a lot of grappling and stuff. And it was only the last sort of year of my professional career was that a coach came over and he brought in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And being in England, we were just like, what are you talking about? And it was amazing. It took even our ground game in rugby just to a whole new level. And it was just always so fascinating, fighting against different opponents. And it's just, and like you said, it's just so much thinking goes about it. And you're trying to figure out and play around with these people and try to find something to grab and to get into some sort of lock. And it's such a fascinating sport.
That's why I definitely prefer gi over no gi, because the gi helps you to get those better grips and pry things open a lot easier.
Yeah, I imagine so. What is actually some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and how has those lessons applied to life in general?
I think probably the biggest thing that I learned from jiu-jitsu was just to stick with it. Like, nose to the grindstone and just keep going, and you're eventually gonna start to get better. Because when I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it was right after my first year of undergrad. And I was okay in school. You know, I was like getting B's and whatnot, because I'd never really been told I needed to work hard. It was kind of like, just go to school, whatever. But then I started Jiu-Jitsu, and my Sensei Steve, was like, you know, you're good at this. You need to work hard. You need to do this, you know, and just that constant, like, you can do better. You can do this. You can do better. You can sub him. You can sub him. You need to do this. And I worked hard and was like, okay, I did sub him. And that kind of carried over into school. And it's like, hey, if I actually study hard, I can get an A. And then I ended up graduating with department honors. So, you know, I went from getting B's, and I think I even got a D during my first year, to graduating with department honors. And then just continuing on and getting all those different college degrees, because it was that mindset of, no, you can do this. You just need to work harder. You know, don't let yourself slack off. You know you're better than this. So quit stealing my spotlight. So, you know, you just that mentality of work hard. And you think this is how hard you work? You can work harder. You can do better. You can achieve more. Don't settle for this. Yeah, that's okay, but you're better than that. And I think that's the biggest thing for me.
Who's been your biggest inspiration throughout life and career, sort of in general, or at least one of those inspirations? And what did you take from that person?
I think one of the biggest inspirations for me was my original karate jiu-jitsu instructor, Steve Twimlow, because he was probably the first person, like I said, who looked at me and was like, no, you're better than this. And it just, you know, he would never let me slack off. He'd push me, and he wouldn't let the guys give me an inch. Like, when I come into practice, they're all trying to kill me, because he knew I could take it and he knew I could do better. And when he and I would spar, like, he wasn't pulling punches. And he's from New Zealand, so he's Maori. He's got a big old jaw, these hands. He's just like, I swear his hand is like the size of 1.5 of mine. His knuckle was like an inch by inch, like, and he never took it easy on me because he expected more of me and he knew I could achieve it. And so he's always pushed me and you know, just kind of had that faith that I could do it. And when you got somebody who's just like, you can do this. Why aren't you achieving this? Why haven't you done it yet? And just continuing to push you in a positive manner, it really did start to shape and change everything.
Oh, brilliant! I love what you said about Maoris and Kiwis in general. First flying to Australia and playing professional rugby league in the UK. We played against a couple of Kiwis here and there, but then when you come against a whole squad and you're just like, holy shit, it's like it's the most intimidating things in the world. Like, surely we can't play against these guys. And then you find out that these same kids are even younger than you are. Holy crap! I was like, what are you feeding these guys over there? I need to go live over there.
Yeah.
So we've gone through a decent amount today. I want to know from you 2 to 3 big takeaway points that people can implement to improve their lives today from, I guess, a sports performance nutrition perspective.
I would say the biggest thing is don't be afraid of carbs, especially like pure sugar. When you're working out, don't be afraid of it. It is good. It will help you. Don't fear the sugar. All right. Carbohydrates are vital for performance and recovery. So don't be afraid of sugar. Another big one is hydration. Make sure that you're staying hydrated not only throughout the day, but once you get done training, you really got to get your hydration up because you are going to sweat out more than you could possibly take in. It's just physiologically. You sweat out about 2 quarts of fluid when you exercise, 2 quarts per hour. You can only absorb about a quart. So you are going to get dehydrated when you train. So you need to go into your training session hydrated, and then you need to focus on rehydrating post-exercise. And then I think the third thing would just be push yourself. Don't ever be satisfied with, where you're at. You can always learn something new. You may not be able to become pro, but you can become more efficient at the level you're at. You can learn new ways of doing things. You can always be helping your younger teammates. There's always something you could be doing to better either yourself, your situation. Just don't stop. Don't settle. Don't settle for where you're at. Always try to improve.
Is there a particular, I guess, formula you guys like using for hydration to make sure that people are like, okay, I need to roughly be around this?
So I usually just have my athletes go by looking at their urine, because that's easiest. You can look at, your calories that you consume. If you consume 1,000 calories, you should consume 1,500 milliliters of fluid. So basically it's 1.5 times your calorie amount is how many milliliters of fluid you can consume if you want to do the math. But looking at your urine, if it's light, yellow to clear is perfect. Post-exercise, when you're looking at rehydration, like I said, you're going to want to consume about 6 to 8 ounces every 15 to 30 minutes because you got to give your GI tract time to absorb. You can't just slam a gallon of water and think your body's going to absorb it. It needs time to process it.
Is there anybody that wants to sort of get into, we spoke a little bit about knowledge, education, that wants to learn more about how to optimize nutrition for performance, doing weight cuts correctly. Is there any recommended reading books that you think people should check out that would help with that?
Well, there's a really good book, I believe it's called The Renaissance Diet 2.0. Obviously I recommend our book. It's not only because we wrote it, but one of the things I really love is that at the end of all of our chapters is our sources. So if there is something you want to learn more about, the sources are right there. You can dive into it and you can go as deep as you want down that rabbit hole and, really get a great amount of knowledge in that one textbook. So that's, I always recommend ours. Same with our training book and our recovery. We've got all the different facets. Derek is working on a water cutting book right now, so that'll be out soon. So those are all good options, when you're looking for stuff to read. If you're wanting to look for actual textbooks, the National Strength and Conditioning Association has got good textbooks on nutrition and performance, as does the American College of Sports Medicine. But those are going to be more textbooks, so not as fun to read as our stuff, but full of really good information.
What I love about you guys' stuff, and I recently picked up the hypertrophy principles book, and what I love about it is that it's scientifically proven. It's done by you guys yourself. It's got practical implications as well, but also that just coming to your one company you can get everything because you've got such an array of specialists of like whatever you need, just go to this one place and you can find everything.
Yeah. Nick did a really good job of pretty much finding someone from every field and bringing us all together under one umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. He's done phenomenally well, phenomenally. What's next for you, Jen? I'm interested in what's the rest of this year look like? Are you writing another book for the guys as well? Are you helping Derek with his?
So we are getting ready to release some resistance band training templates because everybody keeps getting shut down, so they can't train. And I don't know how it is over there, but here, if you want to buy weights, you got to pay like 3 times what they should cost. It's ridiculous. So we're putting together a training system that you can do using only resistance bands, because you can still get those at a normal price. So that's coming out soon. Professionally, I'm also getting certified as a sports dietitian, because you have to be a regular dietitian for 5 years working with athletes, and then you get this other distinction. So that's just something fun, something kind of cool, just another pin in the hat. And then performance-wise, I'm hoping that Pans and Worlds and everything goes on as they normally would throughout the year, but we just kind of got to wait and see what happens. That's why I was jumping on these opens as soon as they were open, ready to be registered.
Whereabouts are the Worlds going to be this year?
I assume everything's going to be in Florida, because normally Worlds are in Vegas, but Vegas is still shut down. But Florida's wide open. I'm assuming we'll be in Orlando again for both Pan Ams and Worlds.
Do they run a pretty good comp over there?
Yeah, they do. They do it at the Spurs Arena in Orlando, and they've got it set up really nice. They get you pretty separated. They only allow the competitor in on the day they compete, and you can bring one corner or coach with you. And so, they're able to stay within the COVID regulations, but still, pretty good turnout. So.
And it's good for you as well, less people.
Oh, yes, I love it. Nobody's allowed in. I would love it if my competitors would just come and grapple me in my basement. And that's what I want. So.
And lastly, Jen, where can people find you? Where can they see more of what you're doing? What's the best place to look?
Obviously, the Renaissance Periodization website. You can also look on Instagram. It's just Jen Case at RP Strong. And, you check me out. Most of my stuff is pictures of this guy because he's so cute. He makes it so much more entertaining.
Do you prefer the dog or the cat?
Everybody, geez, I can't pick. Don't hear me. I can't say.
Everyone's the same. I love you all equally.
Yes.
Jen, you've been an absolute pleasure to chat with. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap, ladies and gents.
If you want to optimize your health, fitness, and lifestyle and learn the tools and the tricks and the knowledge to be able to sustain a healthy and fit lifestyle, then please go check out my books on my website. As a loyal subscriber, you get a cheeky little discount. So I'll see you in there.